mics again for Brother Dr. Umar Johnson.
All right, family, we're going to talk about the government and the takeover. Anybody remember the Super Bowl last year? When the power went out for almost a quarter's length of time. That was not an accident.
Hit that mic button.
Testing one. Testing 1, 2. Are you able to
Yeah,
tell?
yeah.
I'm good.
There's a book that I'm going to recommend that you read. One of the things we have to do is we have to read books that are written by non-African scholars as well. You're going to have to. You're not going to get a thorough enough political education if you're only reading black authors, because you're not reading the books written by people who participate in the think tanks that run this country. Are y'all following me? So you're going to have to get used to reading some very boring material with some very important information in it. One such book is a book called Trilateralism. There's a book called Trilateralism. The Trilateral Commission was established in 1973 by Zbigniew Brzezinski on the request of the Rockefellers Council on Foreign Relations. Trilateral means America, Europe, and Japan. Trilateralism. Basically, they operate and dictate global policy from those three centers. That's one of the reasons why in the Far East, the Japanese are considered the white men of Asia. This is what the other Asians refer to the Japanese as. Remember, as a result of the World War II Pearl Harbor bombing, one of the conditions of the treaty between Japan and America is that they can never have a standing army. So Japan is nothing more than an American colony. Okay, it's important that you understand that. Zbigniew Brzezinski, you need to read every book he wrote. He's the brainchild, the brain master behind the Trilateral Commission. He was also the grand master behind President Obama's ascendancy and ultimate election as president of the United States. He was the European who predicted on national television that President Obama would be the next president, because he helped set it up. There's a book he wrote called The Grand Chessboard. I'm going to spell his last name for you, but I want you to read The Grand Chessboard. Brzezinski, B-R-Y-Z-E-N-S-K-I. B-R-Y-Z-E-N-S-K-I. First name begin with a Z. Zbigniew. I'm not going to spell that because I don't know how. But look up the last name and you'll get it. The Grand Chessboard. This is the book that prophesies 9/11, prophesies the government shutdown, prophesies the war in Afghanistan, because he helps make these decisions. He's also a Bilderberg. And you know you don't become president of the United States unless you meet with the Bilderbergs and they approve you. The Bilderbergers are probably the most powerful organization in the world. There's some debate as to whether or not it's them or the Freemasons. I would argue that the power invested in the Bilderberg, and there's a lot of Freemasons around that table, supersedes the power of any other think tank, including the Illuminati. The Bilderberg is it. Okay? The Bilderbergs originated at a conference that was held at a hotel called the Bilderberg in 1954, I believe it was. And I believe the hotel was in Holland, Hotel de Bilderberg. And all the big wigs, if you own an NFL team, you own an NBA team, major newspaper, network radio, anybody who is somebody is at that team, except black folks. But I heard that they started to allow a couple. I heard through the grapevine, I still have to substantiate, that Earl Graves, the brother who built Black Enterprise, somebody told me that he's the first black skull and bone initiate. I don't know if that's true or not. It needs to be investigated. Okay, but that's what I'm hearing. So let's talk about enemy of the state. One of the things you're going to read in the Grand Chessboard is what? In order for the New World Order, and don't get spooked out about the New World Order. All it means is is the permanency of white supremacy to a point where it can never be reversed again. What they want to do is they want to consolidate all power under a central authority. That's all New World Order means. In other words, instead of having a prison in London, and another prison system in America, and another one in Jamaica, and another one in Nigeria, and another one in Canada, why don't we just have one global prison system? So if one of the inmates escape, and you catch him, you can just lock him up in your jail because we all under the same system. Instead of America having its own stock market, and China having its own stock market, and Nigeria having its own stock market, why don't we just have one? This spells disaster for black people. Why? Because there's no way to escape to. Under New World Order, no matter where you go, you're subject to the jurisdiction of that order. For example, my Moorish brothers, they talk about jurisdiction and being free from other people's control. Under New World Order, that would mean nothing. Because under New World Order, no matter where you go, you're subject to the same authority. Does everybody follow me? It's basically making every country on earth a United Nations of the world, so to speak. One banking system, one prison system, one miseducation system. Ain't that deep? One economic system. So New World Order just means we need to make this thing permanent. Everybody needs to bow down, get down to lay down, okay? And the bankers are going to run the whole show. Because the world is controlled by the money man, period. Federal Reserve Bank is not one bank. The Federal Reserve is 13 independently owned German Jewish banks, most of whom financed Hitler's campaign against the Jews. Okay? Things that we need to know. Now, what is happening? Why did Obama become president? It's because under Obama, they would be able to do things that they couldn't do under a white person. He was necessary. Now, President Obama has signed 139 executive orders since he's been president. And he signed some very landmark legislation as a result to the taking back of people's civil liberties. Now, as black people, we know we don't have no civil liberties anyway. Okay? Dred Scott, white man has no laws. Black man has no laws that a white man has got to respect. That's why George Zimmerman walked. And by the way, I would argue that the George Zimmerman acquittal, you're as responsible for him being acquitted as is the jury. Because black people under Obama has bought into this post-racial America where you created an atmosphere where race could be taken off the table in the Trayvon case. You did that. Okay? It's post-racial America. Get over slavery. We're all Americans. You with your sick conscience created a scapegoat for that. He was going to walk before the case started. Why? Because America is run by power, not by law. We're going to let Zimmerman walk unless black people give us a good enough reason not to. We're going to let Zimmerman walk unless black people give us a big enough reason not to. I was in South Florida doing the verdict. Black folks were walking around stunned. I was interviewed in Miami that same night, Trayvon's hometown. Brother said, is he going to walk? I said, yes, he's going to walk. You sure? They're going to let him go? He's going to go free. Why? Because there's going to be no black pushback. Al Sharpton totally been bought out. Most of the people who speak for you ain't going to say nothing. And black people in general are so in love with Obama that he's more important than your children. He's going to walk. And so he did walk. People were talking about it was about the law. The only difference between Emmett Till lynching and Trayvon Martin lynching is that in Emmett Till lynching, the white folks told you the truth. We let him go because they was white. And he was black. Only difference with Trayvon is they wasn't as honest. They said it was the law. Same situation. Black male lynched, and the killer goes free because you have no consequences. White man gonna do worse stuff than that until you push back. So you gotta understand something. Everything you got in America, you got through armed street protests and struggle. You didn't get nothing through no voting. Nothing you ain't get free through voting. You ain't get the right to vote through voting. Everything we got was because people went to jail, people got beat, people lost their jobs, people sacrificed. You're looking for a peaceful revolution. Won't ever happen. Won't ever happen. Fighting against white supremacy is like driving a car. You take your foot off the brake, that car will start zooming and it's going to pick up momentum as it goes. Same thing with white supremacy. We stopped fighting back in the 60s and it has been picking up momentum ever since then because black people are afraid to be black. You're the only people in America who want to be something other than what you are. When a Chinese man walks in the room, he walks in as a Chinese man representing all his people, their ambitions and their weaknesses. East Indian walks in the room, he ain't representing people of color, he represents East Indians. When Jews walk in the room, they represent Jews. When black people walk in the room, you represent everybody who's oppressed in the world. How are you going to fight for other people when you didn't even fix your own problems yet? But we love to get other people to participate in our struggles. In Baltimore, your movement has to be unapologetically African. You got to walk in the room and make it clear, I am not here to talk about other people's children. I'm here to talk about mine. I'm not here to talk about the contracts y'all giving to people of color in Baltimore. I'm here to talk about the contracts that are being given to blacks. Stop letting people define you as a minority. Stop letting people put you in groups with other people who can't stand you no more than the Europeans. So Baltimore city government has what, 20% set aside for minority businesses? How many of those minorities who got contracts were black? So they got a 20% set aside, but they want to give 5% to the Asians, 5% to gay people, 5% to white women, because they classify as minority too. Gay people classify as minority too. Look at this. So what's left for black folks? Almost nothing, because you're afraid to say, I'm only interested in what affects my community. Jews do it all the time. They ain't fighting for nobody but Jews. Latinos ain't fighting for nobody but Latinos. Arabs ain't fighting for nobody but Arabs. But black people, look at the NAACP and Herb League. They invited me to speak at the conference 2 years ago in New Orleans. You could not tell it was a black conference. So there was more non-blacks than black people. NAACP, totally financed by Europeans. Even the Congressional Black Caucus in D.C. has changed the definition of its purpose. They affirm that we no longer just represent black people. This is what the Congressional Black Caucus say. We represent all people. So that means black people don't have a special interest group. You don't have no group in this country that's legitimate, that's fighting only for you. Everybody is handcuffed into integration. So what is Obama up to? Has anybody heard of the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act? $662 billion for the defense of the U.S. and its interests abroad. America spends more money on so-called defense than anything else in the budget. But they'll tell you that they're spending too much money on school for black kids. Or we're spending too much money on welfare checks. We're spending too much money on fixing up the projects. That's nonsense. Nearly half of the American budget goes to defense. Now, white supremacy hides the truth behind the words. Look at the word defense. Who has attacked America lately? So what do you mean defense? It's really offense. Now, under this law, which was signed by President Obama, they can lock anybody up considered a terrorist. And they can lock you up without a jury. They can deny you an attorney. And the definition of the word terrorist is loosely defined to include anybody who speaks out against American interests. Technically, I would meet the definition. Technically, most of you would meet the definition of terrorism. This is what they're doing now. Locking people up, putting you in jail, no due process, and without congressional oversight. Obama can literally order anybody to be arrested and detained. No trial, no jury, no nothing. A power that the United States Constitution was written to prevent him from having. The United States Constitution was written with the intent to prevent the president from becoming a king. For those of us who got our degrees in political science like I did, we studied that as a religion, didn't we? That's why you have the Congress, the Supreme Court, and the president. Legislative, judicial, and executive to make sure they check and balance each other. Keep the power in check. But there's something called an executive order. An executive order allows the president to make a law without going through Congress. Obama signed 139 of them already. And most of them work against your best interests. One of the first executive orders was what? To give money to groups in Africa that advocate abortion and hysterectomy for black women. That is one of Obama's first acts of office. Get rid of black children. Him and his wife, staunch supporters of birth control. And by the way, the Department of State considers what? Global population to be the top threat to American interests, not terrorism. Too many black people being born in the world is the #1 concern of the United States government. That's why you have homosexuality spread like wildfire. Cut them babies down. Every kid we convince to be gay, that's 2 or 3 kids we ain't got to worry about seeing because they done with it. This is the information we got to teach our children so they understand what's going on. President Obama's National Defense Resources Preparedness Executive Order. March 16th of 2012, the president can take control of all national resources, including food and water. Now, some of y'all would say they would never do that. So then why did he sign it into law? They just making up stuff? No, sir. You don't put on a helmet unless you're about to go ride a motorcycle. They getting ready for the big showdown. And you so busy worrying about the Ravens' record. You so really busy worrying about who will make it to the Super Bowl. I consider Sunday to be the worst day in the black community. Not for church reasons either. Nothing to do with the church. Because on Sunday, more black men sit in front of the television for 12 hours and don't move. Do you know what we could do if that many black men came to a meeting all Sunday long? You know what type of progress we can make? No, but you'll get 12 hours a week to the NFL. Overgrown ass men, overgrown boys. This is by my school. One of the things we're going to have is a non-traditional sports program. Basketball, football, and track. Is that the only thing we can do? There shouldn't be just one Tiger Woods. There should be 100 Tiger Woods. But our kids don't have access to golf in the hood. There shouldn't be one Serena and Venus. But our kids don't have access to that in most neighborhoods. We should have more black swim champions. But how many swim teams do we have in Baltimore that you can afford to send your kids to? That sister who won the gymnastics thing the other day? We should have more sisters into that. But where's the gymnastics programs in Baltimore? So what white folks do is they build barricades around certain sports so they can always dominate them because you can't get the hell in. Hockey. We need more blacks into that. In other words, we would probably have more millionaires than we got now if we just expose our kids to more sports than what we give them. What about horseback riding? All this other stuff. What about race car driving? Well, I don't know about that. It's kind of dangerous. Count me out. But my point is we need to expose them to more. Besides basketball and football and track. Under this executive order, it eliminates judicial oversight for anything considered national security. If President Obama says this is a national security issue, there's nothing the Supreme Court can do about it. I keep telling y'all you don't live in a democracy, but y'all don't listen. This is a dictatorship. This country is run just like England, by a crown that is untouchable. You say, prove it? I say, show me the word democracy in the United States Constitution. Show me the word democracy in the United States Constitution. Show me the word democracy in the Pledge of Allegiance. Show me the word democracy in any one of the 50 state constitutions. It's not there because this is not a democracy. It is a republic. And it is a rule of power. It is an oligarchy. Ain't no rights, no civil rights. The government is going to do what it wants to do. And the only way you're going to stop them is by giving them a moment of pause. Obama is the new emperor. His executive orders allow for citizens to be forced to work without pay. Did you know that? Oh yes, do your research, don't believe me. President Obama has signed an executive order. He can make you work and not get paid if it is in the interest of national security. Could you imagine that? The Army walking down the street in Baltimore telling people, I'm assigning you to a job, this is where you ought to report. If you don't, you can go to jail perpetually. The Secretary of Defense, under national security, can control all activity on water. Control all activity on water. Ships, trade, swimming, anything with water. Secretary of Commerce controls all building materials. You won't even be able to buy them under martial law. Secretary of Transportation controls all motor vehicles. With a stroke of a pen, Obama can say nobody's allowed to drive anymore in America. You must walk. We're taking your car because we need them for national security. We're shipping them all to Mexico for whatever reason. The Secretary of Agriculture will control all food, farms, and livestock. So this is important because a lot of us say, well, you know, as long as we got our own farms, as long as we got our own gardens. Oh, really? Not under this. Under this, they'll come into your privately owned garden that you built with your private money and say this belongs to the state now. You got the best food in Baltimore? We thank you. We're taking it over. Goodbye. That's right. You can pull out your mortgage ID card if you want. No, I'm not picking up my mortgage brothers and sisters. I love them. But I want us to understand that it ain't about law. It's about power. Secretary of Health to control all the health services and supplies. Could you imagine if they shut down every hospital? Or decide who can go to one? And the Secretary of Energy control all energy supplies. When I was in Detroit the other day, my cell phone didn't work for the whole day. It just did not work. People would call me, there was a voice message that I didn't even leave on it. True story. The other day I was freaking out. I said, oh, I'm down in Detroit. Come on. Get me back to Philly. I need one more cheese. They can shut down the internet at will. That's why for those of us who organize, don't make your whole movement an internet-based movement. You play into their hands. We have to go back to print media. See, when you print a newspaper, a flyer, a handbill, they can't control that. But if all you want to do is an e-book, they love e-books because whenever they shut down the e, there won't be no read. I got to understand that. People trying to lead a revolution on Facebook. It's not going to happen. You need to learn from the Jehovah's Witnesses. And I can talk about it because my grandma was. I was traumatized. No, but my grandma. Look at the Jehovah's Witness movement. Are they on Facebook? No. Twitter? No. MySpace? No. They are at your front door knocking with printed materials. That's how you organize black people in 2013. Stop being lazy. The internet made you lazy. You want to send out a mass email, a web blast, and then when nobody shows up to the event, you want to blame the people. No, it's you who are lazy. Those brothers from the Nation of Islam out there on the corner with their newspapers, that's what we all supposed to be doing. The computer is under their control. Anybody ever see that movie, Enemy of the State? Gene Hackman, Will Smith? It's time to watch it again. Anybody ever see that movie called The Siege, Denzel Washington and Bruce Willis? It's time to watch it again. They're moving closer to that right now. Who runs America? The President of the United States or the National Security Council? Now remember, by law, the National Security Council decides who's in control of what in a state of emergency. Now let's look at who's on the National Security Council. The President, the Vice President, Secretary of State, which was an interesting choice. Because, what's his name again? John Kerry, because you know he's Skull and Bones. That's why he was put there. Secretary of the Treasury, private money, Secretary of Defense, Assistant to the President for National Security, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that's the military, Director of National Intelligence, Chief of Staff, Counsel to the President, and Assistant to the President for Economic Policy. Now we're talking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now one of those positions is a congressman. Now one of those positions is a Supreme Court justice. Only 2 of those positions are elected, President and Vice President. I want you to recognize that of the 12 or so, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, of the 11 permanent members of the National Security Council, only 2 were voted in the office. The others were appointed. The others were appointed, but yet they dictate American policy. Who told you voting changes anything? The people who run America are not voted by you. And you really don't even vote for the president and the vice president either. According to the Constitution, who votes for the president? And you don't have to believe me, go get a Constitution, you should own one anyway. The Electoral College, who are chosen by rich white property-owning men with power and prestige and privilege. The biggest lie told in America is that people choose the president. You have never chosen not one from Washington, and you never will. Al Gore beat George Bush by at least 500,000 popular votes. I'm not even talking about the votes that was thrown in Florida. Forget them votes. I'm talking about the ones that were counted. He beat him by 500,000. But George W. Bush had 2 more electoral college votes, and he took the White House. In your lifetime, you saw a president who was not chosen by the people go into office. This is not a democracy. And our children need to understand that this is not a democracy. In fact, when you study the creation of the United States, you find what? That many of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were not only slaveholders, but they were also Freemasons. And when you study deeper, you're going to find that George Washington was an agent of the British Crown, and that the American Revolution was brought to a premature stop. Why? Because there was a treaty that was made between Great Britain and America that would bring an end to the war but keep America under the control of the Crown. This is 2 sides to one story. That's why America and Britain is like this to the day. Because the European Freemasonry is ruled through Britain and France and other places. So there's no such thing as Masons going to war with other Masons, not indefinitely. That was done to give the illusion that America was the birthplace of independence. You got to outthink your oppressor because he's outthinking you and running game on you, and you can't see it. Isn't it interesting that the Attorney General is not even allowed in those meetings unless he's asked? He is the top law enforcement officer in the country. Attorney General Holder. He's not even a permanent member. He only comes when we ask you to come here. Get that democracy out of your head. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the Republic. And a lot of y'all got your kids pledging that. I'm going to pledge allegiance to special education. I'm going to pledge allegiance to mass incarceration. I'm going to pledge allegiance to police brutality. I don't understand how y'all do that. I never did. My father said, you will never pledge that flag. They tried to throw me out of military school for not pledging. They said, how you want to come to a military school and not pledge the flag? And they could not throw me out. Why? Because the military school that I attended in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania was publicly funded. If it is a public school or a charter school, they cannot make your child say the Pledge of Allegiance. If they do, it is a lawsuit. Y'all need to know that. Because I still get parents who call me routinely talking about the teacher made my son stand up. Tell your son the next time they do that, pull out the red, black, and green flag and pledge allegiance to black power. Right there on the spot. The Constitution is irrelevant. Article 1, Section 1 of the United States Constitution states that all legislative powers shall be invested in a Congress. All legislative powers shall be invested in a Congress that should have a Senate and a House of Representatives. That's what the Constitution says. It does not say all legislative powers are vested in the president. The president is the what branch of government? Executive. He executes the laws that Congress makes. Not Obama, he makes his own. Not George W. Bush, he makes his own. Not Bill Clinton, he makes his own. Not Danny Bush, he makes his own. And we don't even know who they're going to put in there next. But I'm going to tell you right now, that next president is going to be the showdown for black folks. And I don't like to be the bringer of doom and gloom. But the fact that you let that man do nothing for 8 years but worship the ground he walked on, is going to get you in a whole bunch of trouble when he's gone. Because by virtue of your example with Obama, no other president in American history from this day forward will ever have to be accountable to black people again because you let them not be. That was your fault. Even if you wanted to be an Obama supporter in secret, in public we should have been a unified force that still put pressure on him like we did for everybody else. You don't let nobody go into that White House with the type of hell we catch as a race and don't ask him to do nothing but be black. That is sickness. That is sickness. Just be black. You don't let your mayors just be black. You don't let your council people just be black. You don't let your state reps just be black. You don't even let your block captains just be black. But the most powerful black politician in the country is allowed to do nothing for black people and be celebrated like a hero. So when Hillary get in there, she don't want to hear nothing. And she's a liberal Democrat, and she don't want to hear nothing. You know that's why she gave up her position. Because she's thinking about running. And you can't win being that close to Obama, so I'm going to give up this office, so I got 3 years to separate myself from him. I don't know if they're going to give it to her, because you know presidents are chosen 4 years in advance, which means that they will know by the new year who his replacement is. This is how America runs. They don't leave nothing up to chance. You think people are elected and then they count the votes in secret and tell you the truth about who really won? The president as king. An executive order becomes law as soon as it's published. It does not have to go through Congress. Now, Congress can vote to support an executive order, but Congress really doesn't have the power to strike one down. So the president can literally do whatever they want. And we do know that what? The Constitution gives the president to put troops any way he wants. He cannot declare war. Congress has to declare war verbally, but the president can put troops into action. As long as he don't call it a war, he can still wage war. See, these are games that they play, like the 13th Amendment game. Slavery shall not be allowed in these territories, except as punishment for a crime. Oh, well, this is real easy. So we outlawed slavery, but we inlawed involuntary servitude. And all we want to do is create a mass incarceration system that locks black men up, so basically they still slaves anyway. This is what they're doing right now. One thing you got to understand about white supremacist doctrine and logic, what it says in line A, it takes away in line B. You got to master that. It's like when they do your child's psychological evaluation report. Raheem is a very bright kid, but he's very retarded. Playing trickology on you. This is what they do to you. I love your son. He is wonderful. Oh my God, he is just the apple of my eye in the class. But he needs medication. You just said he met. Trickology. You got to start out thinking you're oppressive. Executive Order 10990 authorizes the takeover of transportation, highways, and seas. Executive Order 10995 authorizes the takeover of all communications in media. Remember when 911 hit? No matter what channel you turned on the news, everybody was saying the exact same thing. You think that was a free press during 911? No! President Clinton actually signed the executive order while he was in office that put all radio, newspaper, and TV under the direct control of the White House. Ain't no free press. Remember Connie Chung? She thought it was a free press. And you see what they did to her? You're gone. They don't play them games. You start trying to report stuff that the government did not authorize, you can end up dead. You see what happened to the European who wrote Dark Alliance, Gary Webb, who exposed that the CIA is the biggest drug dealer in America. He's gone now. What's the other guy? Yeah, shot himself in the head. Yeah, right. Working on another book. Shot himself in the head, working on another book. That's right. I don't care how crazy you is, you want to finish that book first. Okay? And who's the other guy? Behold the pale horse? He knew he was going to get killed. He said it. I done leaked out too much. They're going to get me. He was so paranoid, he didn't even put his name on the cover of his book. Talking about a free press. Do you know that America still has a list of books that are banned in this country that you cannot read? Ain't no free press. And that's why they want everybody to go to ebook. People talk, Umar, you going to put your book on ebook? No. So they can take it? And even I won't be able to get my own book? Have you seen what the white publishers are doing now? They're buying the copyrights, the classic black books, and putting the copyrights on the shelf and never printing the book again. That's why they want everything to go to E. It's a scheme, y'all. They want all the libraries to shut down. Put it all on a computer. We don't want no more print books. We want to save trees. We don't want to save black people, but we want to save poison ivy. That's why they want everybody to go E. Because if you go E and there's no print literature, the minute they push the button, I'm encouraging all of you to keep a physical library. I'm also encouraging all of you to start buying those real good classic books that you're going to want to pass down to your grandchildren. Because in the next 10 years, you might not be able to get them anymore. They are buying up the copyrights and are not printing them anymore. This is what's going on. That's why I'm not a fan of these schools of the future, the Microsoft school, where everything is on a computer. The child will have no books, they just walk around with a laptop. First of all, that's not even good for your eyes, first of all. Okay? But yet and still, I don't like it. Because if that computer goes, so goes all your information. I didn't say you shouldn't back up your files. But But don't you back them up and then get rid of your physical file. Because all they got to do is snatch that and you're done. Stop becoming a slave to technology. And stop letting your kids become slaves to technology. Do you know why we got so many special ed kids in America today? 2 reasons. Number 1, they got rid of phonics-based instruction. Now they have a whole language approach. Whole language means what? We don't teach kids how to read anymore. We just teach them to memorize the words on the board. And why did they get rid of phonics? Because it's hard work. To teach a kid how to read well, you got to put some elbow grease in that. White teachers of America said, let's make it real easy. See that word? Transportation. Remember it the next time. And you're talking to a former school administrator. I know. Phonics means you got to make sure they understand all those letters. Phonemic awareness, phonological awareness, word decoding, word fluency. Remember when you went to school? They make sure you master that. You can break down any word put in front of you. Not now. Some of y'all think y'all kids can read, but they only read words that they memorize on the board. So when you give them words they never saw before, you're like, oh my God, my son can't read. Oh, have you heard about the new GED test? I'm telling you, y'all. I don't even know if it's safe to say what Obama's going. I think we might be at the end now. With the new GED test that comes out in 2014, the test is going to be totally electronic, and they're raising the standard on the test to make it match the Common Core that all the states is rallying around now. This new national curriculum, okay, or national standards for your curriculum, which means what? Less of us are going to be able to pass that test. And the cost for the new GED is more expensive than what it is right now. This is what they're doing, raising the standards on the GED. And I knew it was coming. I prophesied this 10 years ago. You know why? Because if you're going to have a mandatory graduation test, do y'all have a mandatory graduation test to get a diploma in Maryland? You don't have to pass a test to graduate here. Okay. I'm going to test all y'all. But anyway, now we just got to do some research to make sure. But let me give y'all this. Pennsylvania is the 26th state with a mandatory graduation test. It goes into effect in 2015. In 2015, the children of Pennsylvania have to pass 6 of 10 tests. 5 of them are going to be math and science. 5 of them are going to be language, history, and civics. If you fail more than 4, you do not get a diploma, even if you was a straight A and B kid. And the tests don't come from your school district. They come from the state. Guess what Pennsylvania is doing to prepare for the mandatory graduation test? They're building 4 new maximum security prisons right now. Because they know the black boys ain't going to pass them. Which means they know they're going to be in the streets selling drugs, finding some type of way to take care of their babies. School to prison pipeline, you ain't seen nothing yet. Wait until that new GED test kicks in. See, the way they figured, if you know your son ain't going to pass the test, you're just going to tell him to drop out and take the GED. That's what I would do. So they said since they're going to use the GED as the back door, we're going to make the GED just as hard as the graduation test. Now there is no back door. That means what? If any of you are planning on taking the GED, if any of you know of people who need to take it, they better take it before New Year's. Spread the word through Baltimore. If you're taking your GED, you better do it before New Year's. CP 10 is going to get you jacked up. Take it now. Don't wait. The new year is a whole new ball game. Executive Order 10997 authorizes the takeover of all electrical power and all fuels. Halftime of the Super Bowl last year, test run. Let's shut down a quarter of the most popular game on television and see how the public reacts. Government shutdown. Let's shut down half the federal government and let's see how the public reacts. Did y'all hear what happened last Saturday? 16 United States lost the power or the ability to operate the EBT welfare cards for 17 hours. I was in Michigan, Detroit, one of the poorest cities for our people. Nobody EBT card worked for 17 hours. You think that was a coincidence? That was a test run on public reaction. And it just so happens that happened during the shutdown of the government. And you know who has the contract for EBT? Xerox. Xerox. They don't make mistakes. And it damn sure don't last 17 hours to fix it. That was a test run. Executive Order 10998 authorizes the takeover of all food and farms. Executive Order 11,000 authorizes the president to force civilians to work, paid or unpaid. And Executive Order 11,001 authorizes the takeover of hospitals and schools and all welfare programs and subsidies. 11,002, the Postmaster General is to create a national registry of everybody in American soil to make sure everybody's accounted for. Nobody can escape. If you don't have a passport, you need to get one. And you need to get one fast because it takes longer now. You better get a passport so you can get ready to book it. If you ain't got no relationships with nobody outside of America, you better start building one. I'm telling you now, I got relationships. Canada, London, Jamaica, St. Croix, Nigeria, South Africa. I'm connected. I'm going to get there if I got to swim. I want to get there. You got to be, I'm serious. Y'all got to be connected because you don't know how this thing's going to go down. One day you're going to wake up. I hope it ain't in your lifetime. But I'm pretty sure it's going to be in your children's lifetime, if not yours. One day you're going to wake up and see a whole new game. And you're going to say, I never thought this was possible. Where people telling you where to go and how to eat and all that type of thing. Remember during Hurricane Katrina, the FEMA was initiated? And did y'all hear about the black ops killers? There were soldiers going around killing black people for no reason in New Orleans? Sound like a test run for the concentration camps. Sounds like a test run for martial law. They don't have to tell you they declare martial law. They just have to tell each other. $11,003, take over our aircraft. $11,004, the president can move people at will wherever he pleases. How many camps do FEMA have? 600 different camps. Most of the old defunct military bases have been turned into FEMA camps. Some are underground, some are above ground. They have over 600 FEMA camps, not including the prisons. This don't include the prisons. 600 FEMA camps all across this country. Most of them you don't even know where they at. You think they're doing that just for the hell of it? You think they're doing that for Mexicans? You think they're doing that for Latinos? They bringing him here to replace you. You're going to be rounded up in there. No cable, no iPod, no cell phone. Some of y'all couldn't last 5 hours. This is what's coming down the pike. Executive Order 11,005, take over the railroads, waterways, public storage. 11,051, the Office of Emergency Planning to execute the takeovers in the event of war or financial or economic crisis. Now that's interesting because up until President Obama, martial law could only be called in the event of a national crisis that was related to war. Under Obama, you can declare martial law for damn near anything. It ain't got to be related to war. In fact, what's one of the things that you can declare a martial law for in America? The drug crisis. If the drug crisis gets too far out of hand, which is a bunch of nonsense because we know the CIA sells the drugs. But if the drug crisis gets too far out of hand, Obama can declare martial law. Now, I don't want you to just limit martial law to Obama. Every governor can enact martial law in their own state. Y'all do know that. In other words, you can have martial law in Maryland, but nowhere else. And who are the soldiers under martial law? The National Guard and the Coast Guard. They are the domestic soldiers for martial law. So you need to pay attention to what's going on in your state capital. What's the capital of Maryland? Annapolis. Okay. Executive Order 11,310, Department of Justice to take over all prisons. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to deputize prisoners to go out into the streets and kill people. They're going to deputize prisoners to go out into the streets and kill people. First of all, most states have a militia outside the Coast Guard and the National Guard, which are regular white men with rifles, who can be deputized by the governor at any moment to come into Baltimore. If they declare martial law in the city of Baltimore by the governor of Maryland, they have militias set up in every state, white men with rifles, who can be deputized at any moment to come into your city and shoot black folks at will, to get law and order back. Which is why I don't know why y'all giving y'all guns up. I'm not giving up nothing. I'm not giving up a fly swatter or nothing. You don't give up no weapons. Are you crazy? You sitting in Baltimore surrounded by white suburbs. You are totally surrounded by people who don't like you, and you giving up your guns. Are all white people bad? Are all this bad? Let's have that conversation conversation later.
Okay.
Because it's an all-black
A little
meeting.
bit like, you know, I'm the devil.
I didn't call you that yet.
I didn't say it. It's not all about white people being racist.
Okay.
I'm speaking my mind.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you just wipe your shoulder off when he touched you?
What?
Did you? Where's soap bombs at? Where's soap bombs? Excellent. Okay.
You
Take care now.
You welcome.
Okay, we're straight. Look at Jabbar. He was on it. He was on it. I want to test the white woman, but she might get one of the female cancers. We go out and test the white woman. Okay, now let's talk about this. She might have been an agent. They sent her. When I was the keynote speaker for Juneteenth in Alabama. White man sat right in front of me and wrote literally every word that came out of my mouth. He wanted me to know he was an agent. He looked at me, then he went back on my merchandise table, took pictures of my DVDs. Yes. I'm watched. I'm sure Jabari's being watched. I'm sure many of you are being watched. Okay?
Every word you said, these two are sitting here right now.
Yeah, that's what they do. But it's too late for me to turn back. And I use my real name to bring that out to you. But you got to remember, as times get more crucial, we're going to have to be more selective about any non-African we let in amongst us.
Exactly. I say that.
Okay, she just sneaked in because somebody thought she was light-skinned, brother tried to get a number. I'm just kidding. Okay. But you remember, Dr. King led the sanitation workers strike?
Yeah.
A couple nights before he was murdered. Remember the black guys who got into the confrontation that disintegrated the march, and Dr. King had to be rushed away. We found out later that those were paid FBI agitators. I'm saying that to say that you even got to watch the black people you work with. When that Trayvon Martin thing hit, you know how many phone calls I got from people I didn't know, talking about, brother, you need to come on down here and organize the people. And I don't even know you. You see what I'm saying? You're not going to get me somewhere where you can get me caught up in some nonsense because you got your fist in the air. Be careful. Okay? There are so-called RBG people on the government payroll. And I know it for a fact. Because I got an inside connect. Be careful. Some of the people on the lecture circuit, you better be careful. Okay? Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1988, I call it the Kill All Drug Dealers Act. It denies federal benefits to drug users and traffickers. Up to $10,000 in fines for anybody, even if you're in possession of marijuana. A minimum, check this out, a minimum sentence of 20 years or death for anyone participating in a drug-related killing or who counsels someone else to participate. Now, of course, we don't want black people killing black people, but we know how the cops like to pin stuff on people who ain't done nothing. So you got brothers and sisters going to jail for a minimum of 20 years. For a minimum of 20 years, you got to watch this kind of stuff. And guess what? I didn't hear elected black officials say anything about that. Oh, did you hear about the new Obama executive order, him and Attorney General Holder? I learned about this in Boston at the Mass Incarceration Conference. They got this law. Y'all need to know this because some of y'all know people who are in jail. If you are arrested for a drug charge, the minimum sentencing law does not apply to you. Let me take that back. The minimum sentencing law doesn't have to apply to you if you were not a part of a gang, a drug gang, if you were not distributing the drugs. They can elect not to give you a mandatory minimum. Now the problem with that is what? Who ain't going to be associated with a group if you're selling drugs? The other thing is distribution. Who defines distribution? If I'm selling a nickel bag of crack, isn't that distribution? But here's the crazy thing about the law. It expires the day President Obama leaves office. This Negro created a 3-year law to make black people think he care about you. That's why. What? Yes. I forget the name of the law, but you can Google it. It was the topic of discussion in in Boston. Google President Obama and Attorney General Holder temporary law to reduce minimum mandatory sentencing for drug offenses. Google that. And it's the law that's saying that the prosecution or the judge can opt out if you were not part of a cartel and if you were not distributing. But if you're selling drugs, how are you not? And then the law expires when he leaves office. Whoever heard of a temporary law? And then we got the Violent Crime Control Act of 1991. $700 million for 10 regional prisons. The federal government has more prisons than most states now. The federal government has more prisoners than most states. $300 million for areas with high drug problems like Baltimore and Philly, right? And what do they use most of that money for? Jails and white cops. It bans certain semi-automatic weapons and requires a 5-day wait for handgun purchase. That's where that 5-day wait comes from. The death penalty for anybody with over 50 federal offenses restricts the delay of execution provision. In other words, you get the death sentence for a violent crime. Your lawyer is going to request a what? A stay of execution, right? To get your case together, fight against it. They can restrict that and cut that down. In other words, they can speed up the time between conviction and execution. They established 10 boot camps for children under the age of 25. This is where they scared straight. Remember the scared straight? Where they take them out in the woods and a whole bunch of white men spit on them and yell at them for 10 hours and they're supposed to come back saved or something like that. Okay? And then 10 years sentence for selling to minors or having minors sell. You go to jail for automatic 10 years. And the interesting thing about this is around the George Herbert Walker Bush, Bill Clinton era. And the interesting thing about black people is y'all love Bill Clinton. But Bill Clinton put more black people in jail than any Republican president we ever had. He's the one who gave us mandatory minimum sentences. He's the one who gave us 3 strikes and you out. He's the one who helped support this law, even though it was initiated right before he came into office. But because he let black people play the saxophone at his inauguration and break dance, it was okay. So if you love Bill Clinton, they knew you was going to go bonkers for Obama. We got 10 more minutes and then we're going to wrap it up. Until Obama, you could only declare martial law for military-related reasons. Under Obama, martial law can be enacted for any reason without justification. Now, in terms of the health care law, this Obamacare, I need to be careful with Obamacare. Do you know that under Obamacare, if you don't have health insurance and can't afford it, you will be forced to buy it anyway? In other words, you can look at Obamacare as the third tax. I don't support it, okay? But I'm not riding with them racist Republicans either, okay? But I don't support it because black people who already ain't making enough money are going to be forced to spend even more money that they ain't got. There's something else about Obamacare you need to know. There's a provision in Obamacare that if you're receiving the free insurance, you have to get a chip, an artificial chip placed in your body. Do your research. Yes, there's a chip that they're going to surgically implant in order for you to receive the free medical care. Now, let me tell you why I think they're going to do that. Do your research. Don't believe me, because some of y'all look like I didn't hear this on the 6 o'clock news. And you ain't going to hear it on the 6 o'clock news because they control the 6 o'clock news. Let me tell you why they want to chip all the blacks. Have you noticed that 10,000 black people go missing in America every year? Yeah. Most will never be heard of again. Do you know why? They are killing black people and taking your organs and giving them to old rich white people so they can live longer. Yep. Remember the Atlanta child murders? Yeah. When they found all those dead infants and toddlers in a dumpster near the Center for Disease Control? That was no coincidence. The Center for Disease Control is snatching black kids and black adults off the street daily because they need humans for research models. Where else are you going to get them? So you got to teach your children, don't get in the car of a stranger. You can't even get in the car of somebody with a 3-piece suit on no more. That's right. They need your pineal glands. They need your kidney, your heart, your liver, your lungs. Black people are the oldest people, and as a result of you being the oldest and the mother and father of civilization, your organs are basically adaptable to anybody else on the planet. So if I need hearts, I want black ones, because if an Asian need a heart, or a white man need a heart, or an East Indian need a heart, or a Jew need a heart, 9 times out of 10, the black one will match. Because you have the parent DNA in you. You have the parent cells in you. Henrietta Lacks. You match to everybody. That's why you have to stop voluntarily becoming organ donors on your driver's license. You don't do that. What you do is you put in your will, you specify that if I die, my organs could be used for relatives, close friends, or other black people? Because you're not giving my heart to George Bush. You ain't giving my heart to Adolf Hitler. Y'all follow me? They're going to take your heart and give it to a cracker to live longer to kill more black people. So one day you coming out the gas station and guess what? You get hit by a Mack truck. Oh, so sad. She was a single mother of 5 kids. She wasn't looking. She didn't look both ways. And the Mack truck just hit her. Do you know that was an orchestrated hit? Because your heart matches some rich white person in England who you never heard of, who needs your heart. There's no such thing as that many black people disappearing every year. Why is it the same amount? They stealing us, y'all. FEMA. Well, I'm going to tell you, my whole message with this, I'm going to go back to the message of the Honorable Marcus Messiah God. He said, what? The future of black people outside of Africa spells ruin and disaster. And I know we're not at a level of consciousness where we could talk about repatriation because we're too much in love with white people. But this whole message here tonight is saying you better start thinking about going somewhere else. Because what's about to happen to you, you don't want to be here when it comes. You better have a safe place to retreat. Better have a safe place to retreat where you can hide and blend in with people who look like you when they come looking. Don't go to Europe. You better go into the bush of the Congo. Come get me now. Come on. FEMA, Executive Order 12148 authorizes the Federal Emergency Management Agency working in concert with the DOD to establish secret underground facilities. If anybody want to study the FEMA camps anymore, do your research on Executive Order 12148. That is the executive order that authorizes them to build underground tunnels as concentration camps for black folk. They waiting for the next black revolution. They waiting for it, which is why we got to be smart. It can't be the way we did it in the 60s. We cannot get out there with guns and march like the Panthers did. We got to be a little bit more clever with it. We got to look like them, but think like us. National Security Council authorized to determine the emergency powers of the government during crisis. In 1983, General Sal Diesel, the chief of FEMA Civil Service Division, stated, "We must prevent dissident groups from gaining access to United States opinion or obtaining a global audience." If you want to know why you've never seen me on Oprah yet, that's why. No dissident voice is allowed to get access to the airwaves. That's why the movies you see from Tyler Perry and everybody else is always nonsense movies. Nothing constructive. Has anybody seen Captain Phillips? Yeah. When you go see Captain Phillips, and it was racism, but this is what I want you to pick out. I want to see when you go see the movie, I want you to pick out the one African so-called pirate who understood white supremacy. But because he couldn't get his other 3 pirates to understand white supremacy, they all died because of it. I want you to see it for the lesson. I don't even think they intended the lesson to be in there. But there was one pirate who told them, don't trust Tom Hanks. But they wouldn't. They start feeling sorry for him because he was hurt and his foot was bleeding and they wanted to, put some Band-Aids on him. And go see the movie. One of them, he said, stop, y'all going soft. Some of y'all in here going soft on white supremacy too. Y'all looking for good white people. You go around all day with a big microscope looking for good white people. As we roll up, I think this is my last slide. Facts. President Obama has issued more than 139 executive orders during his presidency. The writ of habeas corpus, everybody heard of habeas corpus from history class? That allows unlawfully obtained persons to seek freedom. That could be suspended during martial law. State governors can declare martial law in their states without Obama at any time. Congress has never declared martial law, but Abraham Lincoln did during the Civil War. And the governor of Hawaii declared martial law after the Pearl Harbor bombing. Posse Comitatus Act 1878 limits the federal use of military to enforce state law. So under this law, you can't use the Army and the Marine Corps in the cities, right? But the law does not include the Coast Guard or the National Guard. They can be put on Black Baltimore whenever the governor feels like it. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 15 of the Constitution, Congress has the power to call forth militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. In other words, had we reacted like buffoons during the Trayvon Martin trial, they would have had a constitutional right to go out into the streets and assassinate black folks. We got to be smart. Anybody telling you to run out there and shoot white folks and fight cops, you better watch that kind of a person. I don't endorse that type of reckless behavior. The movement we got to have, it got to be well thought out and it got to be concealed to an extent. Okay? Because they're looking for an excuse to mow us down like dogs. In conclusion, I'll leave you with a quote from my ancestor, Frederick Douglass, and I got an announcement before I forget, because I'm going to be back in Baltimore working with Sister Paulette, with the youth, some of our brothers in the juvenile detention center. I'm going to come do a week-long conference for them. If some of y'all got some kids who need to be in that conference, I don't know if it's allowed, but see Sister Paulette. Raise your hand one time, good sister, right there. I'm going to be speaking at the African Village and Cultural Center of Baltimore, Wednesday, December the 4th, 25 East North Avenue. Wednesday, December the 4th, 25 East North Avenue, and we'll probably get started at 7 o'clock. That's my next time in Baltimore. I'm going to go over information that I didn't go over tonight, okay? Bring the youth out with you. Bring your sons, bring your daughters. I hate when y'all come to my lectures and don't bring your children. They need this more than you, okay? So bring them. Any parents with issues on miseducation, bring them as well. So again, Wednesday, December the 4th, 25 East North Avenue. For more information, contact Brother Sankofa at blackgenius360@gmail.com. blackgenius360@gmail.com. Wednesday, December 4th. In conclusion, Frederick Douglass said, if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and deprecate agitation are like men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain but can't stand the thunder or the lightning. They want ocean but can't deal with the awful roar of its waters. He said the struggle we have might be moral, or it might be physical, or it might be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. He said, for 20 years I prayed on my knees to God for freedom, but the Lord gave me no freedom until I got up off my knees and began praying with my feet. He said, men may not get all they work for, but they must certainly work for all they get. He said, if we are going to be free, then we ourselves must strike the first blow. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the people who they oppress. You decide how poorly white people treat you, not them. He said, if a man ain't got strength enough to stand on his own feet, leave him on the ground. Because if you pick him up and he ain't ready to be a man, he's going to fall back down anyway. So you didn't help him, you hurt him even more. He said, but most importantly, you remember that power concedes nothing without a demand. Never did and it never will. The maternal side of my family was brought to Baltimore, Talbot County, Eastern Shore, Maryland. 1701, black man by the name of Bailey. Married a black woman by the name of Selah. They had a daughter named Jenny in 1745. In 1774, Jenny had a daughter named Betsy. Betsy Bailey married a free black man named Isaac. They had about 13 children. One was named Harriet. Harriet was raped by the slave master Aaron Anthony, who owned my family, giving birth to Frederick Bailey in February of 1818. The next year, Harriet's younger sister, young Betsy, was also raped by Aaron Anthony, giving birth to Frederick's brother, Stephen Henry Bailey, my direct ancestor. At the age of 20, Frederick escaped to freedom from Baltimore, went on to New England and became probably the most prominent black leader of all time and definitely of the 19th century. Chief fighter in the anti-slavery movement, working with Martin Delany, the grandfather of revolutionary Pan-Africanism, Harriet Tubman, and others. My grandfather, Stephen, with his son, George, my great-great-great-grandfather, who went on to become the first black public school teacher at Talbot County, Maryland. They fought side by side. United States Colored Troops of Maryland. This is the state from which my family comes. After the Civil War, Grandpa George married Annie Wayman. They had a daughter named Caroline. Caroline relocated from Maryland to Philadelphia after the death of her parents. Caroline had a daughter named Vivian. Vivian married a Cuban immigrant by the name of Cicero Knoll, my Spanish-speaking great-grandfather. They had a daughter named Ida. Ida married James Johnson. They had a son, Jamal, or Alex. He changed his name to Jamal, my daddy. On August 21st, 1974, Jermaine Shoemake was born. That was me. My mom was in love with Jermaine Jackson, so she named me Jermaine. My father couldn't stand it, so soon they got married, he named me Boogaloo Umar Johnson. He called me in the house one day and said, from this day forward, you will never be known as Jermaine again. The windows open, the big cake came. Marcus Garvey was once asked, are you an African or are you a Jamaican? Are you an African or are you a Jamaican? And in response to that, Mr. Garvey said, I will never give up a continent for an island. I'm an African. Yesterday, today, and for all times. Thank you, Black man.
And then you didn't get your book signed, you're going to actually sign your book, all right? You can stand, we're going to close out with our Harambe's. Brothers and sisters, don't leave. We have one free ticket for everyone for the Big Fantastic Show from October from now. You'll see them as you exit, and they'll give you your free ticket, all right? All right, we appreciate you for coming out. We're going to close with the Harambe's. For those who don't know, Harambe, as Swahili means let us all pull it together. We do it 7 times, and then we hold it as long as we can on the 7th time, all right?
Walk right out there.
So, 1, 2, 3.
But me and God cool, he gives me good hooks. Our Father, who art in space, recognize him when I see him, but I never saw his face. The beginning is irrelevant, don't worry about the date. You can't take the flesh, so don't worry about your weight. Get crock pot simmering, the world keeps shivering. Believe in yourself, and I guarantee you live again.
Cry pot simmering, the world keeps shivering. Believe in yourself, and I guarantee you live again.
Of the Rockefellers Council on Foreign Relations. Trilateral means America, Europe, and Japan. Trilateralism. Basically, they operate and dictate global policy from those 3 centers. That's one of the reasons why in the Far East, the Japanese are considered the white men of Asia. This is what the other Asians refer to the Japanese as. Remember, as a result of the World War II Pearl Harbor bombing, one of the conditions of the treaty between Japan and America is that they can never have a standing army. So Japan is nothing more than an American colony. Okay, and it's important that you understand that. Zbigniew Brzezinski, you need to read every book he wrote. He's the brainchild, the brain master behind the Trilateral Commission. He was also the grand master behind President Obama's ascendancy and ultimate election as President of the United States. He was the European who predicted on national television that President Obama would be the next president because he helped set it up. There's a book he wrote called The Grand Chessboard. I'm going to spell his last name for you, but I want you to read The Grand Chessboard. Brzezinski, B-R-Y-Z-E-N-S-K-I. B-R-Y-Z-E-N-S-K-I. First name begin with a Z. Zbigniew. I'm not going to spell that because I don't know how. But look up the last name and you'll get it. The Grand Chessboard. This is the book that prophesies 9/11, prophesies the government shutdown, prophesies the war in Afghanistan, because he helps make these decisions. He's also a Bilderberg. And you know you don't become president of the United States unless you be acquitted. You're as responsible for him being acquitted as is the jury. Because black people under Obama has bought into this post-racial America where you created an atmosphere where race could be taken off the table in the Trayvon case. You did that. Okay? It's post-racial America. Get over slavery. We're all Americans. You, with your sick conscience, created a scapegoat for that. He was going to walk before the case started. Why? Because America is run by power, not by law. We're going to let Zimmerman walk unless black people give us a good enough reason not to. We're going to let Zimmerman walk unless black people give us a big enough reason not to. I was in South Florida during the verdict. Black folks were walking around stunned. I was interviewed in Miami that same night, Trayvon's hometown. Brother said, is he going to walk? I said, yes, he's going to walk. You sure? They're going to let him go? He's going to go free. Why? Because there's going to be no black pushback. Al Sharpton totally been bought out. Most of the people who speak for you ain't going to say nothing. And black people in general are so in love with Obama that he's more important than your children. He's going to walk. And so he did walk. People were talking about it was about the law. The only difference between Emmett Till lynching and Trayvon Martin lynching is that in Emmett Till lynching, the white folks told you the truth. We let him go because they was white. And he was black. Only difference with Trayvon is they wasn't as honest. They said it was the law. Same situation. Black male lynched. And the killer goes free. Because you have no consequences. White man gonna do worse stuff than that until you push back. So you gotta understand something. Everything you got in America, you got through armed street protests and struggle. You didn't get nothing through no voting. Nothing you with the Bilderbergs and they approve you. The Bilderbergers are probably the most powerful organization in the world. There's some debate as to whether or not it's them or the Freemasons. I would argue that the power invested in the Bilderberg, and there's a lot of Freemasons around that table, supersedes the power of any other think tank, including the Illuminati. the Bilderberg is it. Okay? The Bilderbergs originated at a conference that was held at a hotel called the Bilderberg in 1954, I believe it was. And I believe the hotel was in Holland, Hotel de Bilderberg. And all the big wigs, if you own an NFL team, you own an NBA team, major newspaper, network radio, anybody who is somebody is at that table, except black folks. But I heard that they started to allow a couple. I heard through the grapevine, I still have to substantiate, that Earl Graves, the brother who built Black Enterprise, somebody told me that he's the first black skull and bone initiate. I don't know if that's true or not. It needs to be investigated. Okay, but that's what I'm hearing. So let's talk about enemy of the state. One of the things you're going to read in the grand chessboard is what? In order for the New World Order, and don't get spooked out about the New World Order, all it means is the permanency of white supremacy to a point where it can never be reversed again. What they want to do is they want to consolidate all power under a central authority. That's all New World Order means. In other words, instead of having a prison in London, and another prison system in America, and another one in Jamaica, and another one in Nigeria, and another one in Canada, why don't we just have one global prison system? So if one of the inmates escape, and you catch them, you can just lock them up in your jail because we're all under the same system. Instead of America having its own stock market, and China having its own stock market, and Nigeria having its own stock market, why don't we just have one? This spells disaster for black people. Why? Because there's no way to escape to. Under the New World Order, no matter where you go, you're subject to the jurisdiction of that order. For example, my Moorish brothers, they talk about jurisdiction and being free from other people's control. Under the New World Order, that would mean nothing. Because under the New World Order, no matter where you go, you're subject to the same authority. Does everybody follow me? It's basically making every country on earth a united nations of the world, so to speak. One banking system, one prison system, one miseducation system. Ain't that deep? One economic system. So New World Order just means we need to make this thing permanent. Everybody needs to bow down, get down to lay down, okay? And the bankers are going to run the whole show. Because the world is controlled by the money man, period. Federal Reserve Bank is not one bank. The Federal Reserve is 13 independently owned German Jewish banks, most of whom financed Hitler's campaign against the Jews. Okay? Things that we need to know. Now, what is happening? Why did Obama become president? It's because under Obama, they would be able to do things that they couldn't do under a white person. He was necessary. Now, President Obama has signed 139 executive orders since he's been president. And he signed some very landmark legislation as a result to the taking back of people's civil liberties. Now, as black people, we know we don't have no civil liberties anyway. Okay? Dred Scott, white man has no laws. Black man has no laws that a white man has got to respect. That's why George Zimmerman walked. And by the way, I would argue that the George Zimmerman acquittal.
All right, so give it up again for Brother Dr. Umar Johnson.
All right, family, we're going to talk about the government and the takeover. Anybody remember the Super Bowl last year? When the power went out for almost a quarter's length of time. That was not an accident.
Hit that mic button.
Testing one. Testing 1, 2. Are you able to
Yeah,
tell?
yeah.
I'm good.
There's a book that I'm going to recommend that you read. One of the things we have to do is we have to read books that are written by non-African scholars as well. You're going to have to. You're not going to get a thorough enough political education if you're only reading black authors, because you're not reading the books written by people who participate in the think tanks that run this country. Are y'all following me? So you're going to have to get used to reading some very boring material with some very important information in it. One such book is a book called Trilateralism. There's a book called Trilateralism. The Trilateral Commission was established in 1973 by Zbigniew Brzezinski on the request